Well, good morning. My name is David Ruffin, Chair of the North Carolina Historical Commission. Welcome to the December 7th, 2022 meeting. As is the requirement, the first is to call, remember we are meeting today in virtual. We welcome the public, obviously, we welcome staff, we welcome other interested parties that may be joining us and participating in this virtual meeting today. But we do have to do, the first thing is to call the roll. Remember, when we're in virtual format, there will have to be a roll call in the form of every motion made, unlike when we're in person. So the first thing is to establish formally a quorum. So I will call the roll at this point. Dr. Bryan.
Here.
Mayor Clark.
Here.
Ms. Condill.
Here.
Dr. Denard. Dr. Denard, yes, I see him.
Here.
Mr. Dixon. Ms.
Here.
Groom. Ms. Groom. Dr. Johnson.
Present.
Ms. Phillips.
Here.
Mr. Reynolds.
Present.
Ms. Snowden.
Here.
And David Ruffin here. I believe Ms. Groom is the only absentee at this point. So obviously we have a quorum. Also, as part of our protocol, we have a very brief agenda today, but it is requisite for me to ask if there are any conflicts of interest among commissioners. So state that at this point relative to any items that you see on the agenda.
This is Barbara Snowden. I need to recuse myself from the sessions for the Museum of the Albemarle.
Okay. Commissioner Snowden is her degree of activity is so great up there that she's frequently having to do that. That's indicative of her activity. And we do appreciate that, but we certainly will keep that in mind. So the next item is to approve the minutes of the September 21st meeting, which was in person there in the department. They have been provided to the commission. I hope that you've seen those. And so I, at this point, ask if there are any discussions or motions for adoptions or amendments to the minutes of the September 21st meeting.
I move their approval if that's in order.
Dr. Bryan has moved approval. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Dr. Denard has seconded approval of the September 21st minutes. Dr. Bryan, all in favor of Dr. Bryan?
Here, yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Condill?
Yes.
Dr. Denard?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Ms. Groom? She's not here. Ms. Phillips?
I abstain. I was not there.
Okay. Mr. Reynolds?
I'll abstain as well. I was not present for that meeting.
Ms. Snowden?
Yes.
And David Ruffin, yes, I approve. The minutes are approved with 2 abstentions for those that were absent for the September 21st. The minutes are adopted. Excuse me. At this point, we will go through the accessions and deaccessions. And there was a little bit of a technical issue around having those published. I think within the last day or so, we certainly have the full list at this point. So Dr. Waters, I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, to direct us through that. I know this is the quarterly meeting that we traditionally do not have staff members present to present the reports, which they normally do every other quarter. So Dr. Waters, if you don't mind kind of walking us through the sessions and deaccessions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, we apologize for the technical problem with getting these to you, but I believe that everyone's had an opportunity to see the proposed accessions for the North Carolina History Museum and the North Carolina Museum of the Albemarle. And you can tell me if you've had a chance to see the proposed accessions for the Maritime Museums. And I think we'll do those all in one,
Yes.
together in one. And I will tell you that the committee did meet, the internal committee did meet on these, and they were unanimously approved by the committee without any questions. I want to thank the team for the work that they do, you know, on a daily basis to continue and preserve the collection for the history museums across the state. So are there any questions about the proposed sessions for these three museums, Museum of History, Museum of the Albemarle, and for the Maritime Museums? If there are no questions, Mr. Chair.
Dr. Waters, I do have one question. There was some of the attire or dresses, I believe they were. Do they just come in through a group of contributions and then are later determined to not be of value or necessarily originating in North Carolina?
Yeah.
Is that generally the reason why? In other words, after the fact, we realized they may not have any linkage to the state, right?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and in fact, that was a part of the discussion that we had in that internal meeting. So you're correct on
Okay, that makes perfect sense to me. Yes.
So I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, for the call for a vote on these or
Yeah.
motion to.
Hearing no discussion on the accessions of the North Carolina Museum of History, the North Carolina Museum of the Albemarle, the North Carolina Maritime Museums, and the North Carolina Historic Sites, do I hear a motion to approve?
This is Susan Phillips. I move to approve those accessions.
Thompson moves. Do I hear a
And second.
Mayor
Second.
Clark as second. So all in favor, please state by voting aye. Dr. Bryan,
Aye.
Mayor Clark,
Aye.
Ms. Condon,
Aye.
Dr. Denard,
Aye.
Mr. Dixon,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Phillips,
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds,
Aye.
Ms. Snowden.
Recruise myself.
Yes. Yes, and David Ruffin, aye. So it is passed with one recusal. We have the proposed deaccessions, which are on pages 50 through 54 of the North Carolina Museum of History. Yes, sir. Mr.
We
Dr. Waters.
had to take up the accessions for the North Carolina Historic Sites, so we didn't do those.
I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. So the North Carolina Historic Sites, which are 2 pages, I believe, pages 47 and 49. I beg your pardon. Any discussion or questions relative to those proposed accessions for the North Carolina Historic Sites?
Just for your reference, those were also unanimously approved by the committee. And I'm glad Ms. Lemire is here. If there are any questions, she will be able to answer those as well.
Hearing no questions, do I hear a motion for approval of the accessions for the North Carolina State Historic Sites?
This is Dr. Johnson. I so move for approval.
Dr. Johnson moves for approval. Do I hear a second?
This is Susan Phillips. I second.
Ms. Phillips has seconded. All in favor, vote aye. Dr. Bryan,
Aye.
Mayor Clark,
Aye.
Ms. Condon,
Aye.
Dr. Denard,
Aye.
Mr. Dixon,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Phillips,
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds,
Aye.
Ms. Snowden,
Aye.
and David Ruffin, aye. Okay, so approved. We move then to the proposed DIA sessions, which are delineated on pages 50 through 54 of the North Carolina Museum of History. I think this was largely what the question I had about the DIA sessions, yes.
Just for Mr. Chair, just for everyone's reference, those were also unanimously approved by the internal committee for DIA sessions from the history museums, and those are the only DIA sessions that we have for this meeting.
Good. Any further discussion, questions? Do I hear a motion for approval of the DIA sessions?
This is.
I make a motion that we approve the DIA sessions. This is Barbara Snowden.
Has moved that we approve the DIA sessions. Do I hear a second?
Second,
Dr. Bryan has seconded. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes or aye. Dr. Bryan,
yes.
Mayor Clark,
Yes.
Ms. Condo,
Yes.
Dr. Denard,
Yes.
Mr. Dixon,
Yes.
Dr. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds,
Aye.
Ms. Snowden,
Yes,
and David Ruffin, yes. All right, the next item is the Deputy Secretary's report. So Dr. Waters, glad to always have you with us, and we look forward to your comments.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here again. And again, just let me thank you for your service to this commission and to the state and what you're doing to help preserve our history here. I have a couple of the division directors who are here with us. Ramona Bartos is here with us, and Michelle is here as well. So I thank them for joining. Other division directors not here, but you've seen their reports. As you can see, that there's still a lot going on. If you haven't had a chance to fully read those yet, I hope that you will take the time to do that. There are just a few things, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to update you on that are going on. Last night, I think many of you may have heard, we had a wonderful reception at the History Museum that was sponsored by the North Carolina History Museum Foundation Board. Sponsoring, we have here for just one day, and today, last night and today, the governor joined us for that, a very rare first printing of the United States Constitution, which is here on display along with North Carolina's copy of the Bill of Rights. So if you're anywhere close by and you can come down and have a chance to actually see that today. I think it will be there until about 5 o'clock this afternoon. So I hope you'll get a chance if you're close by to do that. But it was a wonderful reception last night, and we were grateful to have the opportunity to actually post it, the copy of the Constitution here. And I think it's one, just to let you know, it's one of only 2 that are known to be in private hands. So a wonderful event. The second thing I'd like to update you on, and Michelle, I'm happy to allow you to chime in here. There are 2 things related to the Division of State Historic Sites. One, and I know Commissioner Reynolds, thank you for your involvement with this as well. With Shallow Ford State Historic Site, there will be a ribbon cutting for that event next week on the 13th. We are excited about the addition of this new historic site as a part of our state historic sites, our few Revolutionary War sites. And Michelle, let me just turn the floor over to you just to say a few brief words about that acquisition.
Thank you, Dr. Waters. Thank you, Commissioner Reynolds, for all of your support. It has been such a remarkable journey that when we really took time to think about it, went back to the 1980s. And so it's been a long road to get here. We have not had a new addition to the Historic Sites family in decades. And so this is a wonderful way to it's really like an early holiday present to the division. We have determined that Shallow Ford, even though it has, in the case of 18th century words, variants of being 1 word and 2, we have officially determined that it will be called Shallow Ford, 2 words, State Historic Site. We find that that is the most accurate to the time period variant of the word. And we've worked with Ansley Wegner in our research branch to determine that. We will have a walk together, a commemorative walk to the Shallow Ford, which was a place where we know Indigenous people used it well before European contact. We know that, of course, it is a part of the Revolutionary War story. We know that it is a part of a migration story of Europeans as well. And enslaved African Americans would have been nearby as well. So it is a story of many people. We will be planting 2 persimmon trees there because that's a native tree to North Carolina that you're seeing fewer and fewer. And we felt that that was a good way to ceremonially recognize the importance of Shallow Ford coming into the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. We're so glad that the secretary will be there and a whole host of people, including the Conservation Fund, which was critical to this effort.
Thank you, Michelle. And so we're excited about that. The next one is also in references state historic sites. Actually, there was 2. As I was thinking, there are 2 more. And Michelle, please feel free to just add anything to this that you feel needs to be added. But later this week, there will be a ribbon cutting at Historic Bath for update, new installation of their new exhibit there. This has been an ongoing project. I want to thank Michelle's team for the work that they've done there. As you all know, we have been discussing the work that we're doing across the department to do updates to many of the exhibits at our state historic sites, our history museums, and even our state parks. That work continues. And so I deeply appreciate the work that Michelle's team has done at Historic Bath. And that will be taking place this Friday. So Michelle, let me just let you say a word about that. And I'll also add here, also the groundbreaking has already occurred at Fort Fisher for the building of a new visitor center at Fort Fisher, which has been much needed. So we're very excited about that as well. Michelle, do you want to just update on those two events?
Absolutely. The name of the new exhibit, which we really love this name, is called, and it's in your report, Along the Banks of Bath Creek, a story of a people and a place. And what we love about this particular exhibit, I'm smiling because it is so beautiful, is that it takes the story of Bath and tells an expansive story over time, often because it is our first town. People want to stay right there with the story of piracy and miss the broad, deep, interesting story across time. And so you're going to see some 20th century images as well as the early histories of North Carolina that has such a powerful maritime story there. The Bath Creek aspect, the ecological story, was really important to us. So I think you're going to see a story that's inclusive ecologically as well as culturally, and particularly because it's a rural community, it's so important for us that we recognize we are a community anchor there. We will be there on Friday with the secretary. We will be cutting a ribbon, and then Saturday will be a big event welcoming the public in a really interesting way. We will be talking about the behind the scenes process of what it means to birth an exhibit. So a lot of us will be there, including collections. So very excited about that. The groundbreaking, we tried twice over to have groundbreaking ceremony at Fisher, and the weather said, nope, you all need to wait. And so, but the work couldn't wait. So the work has begun. Many of you know this is many years in the making. They surpassed 1 million visitors last fiscal year. And so we are in great need of a new visitor center there, and really proud that we're bringing in people from all different walks of life and perspectives to help tell a broader story of the American Civil War and World War II, as a matter of fact. So stay tuned. We will be doing some archaeology there and want to make sure that we're bringing in our American Indian tribes to be a part of that archaeological experience, kind of as a prioritized group as well. That is all that I have to say. I can tell you that it's been a banner year for us, and thank you, Dr. Waters, for the opportunity to share those highlights.
Thank you for being here, Michelle. Thank you all for the work that you're doing in your team, and thank you for those updates. The other update will be coming from from our museums, and we're happy to just kind of to inform you all. You may be following the news around. I'm sure that everyone has been following the news for years around the proposed Civil War Emancipation and Reconstruction Center in Fayetteville, which will be officially the North Carolina History Center on the Civil War Emancipation and Reconstruction in Fayetteville. We got a unanimous support from the City Council and to move that project forward. We were excited about that. The Secretary is not here with us, but I want to thank him for the tremendous support that he gave to that effort as well, and to the members of the community in Fayetteville. I think we were very, very happy to get that unanimous support from the City Council to support that project. And we're looking forward to that moving on. So we'll continue to keep you updated as progress is made on that work. And a special thanks to Commissioner Bryan for the work that she's done to help support that as well. So the second thing that I would like to update you on is that I have been talking about the work that this department is doing to focus on updates to all of our sites, to the exhibits at our sites. That project is moving forward. Again, I want to thank the Secretary and the leadership team here for the tremendous support that they're giving to that work. We are forming another very good partnership with the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and with Carolina Public Humanities to help facilitate some of that work. We'll keep you updated as we move forward on that, but we're excited about that partnership. I'd also like to update you on some new hires that we have made in the department. Both are in Ramona's area in the Division of Historic Resources. And if Ramona wants to say a few words, I'm happy to kind of yield the floor to her to do that. But we are happy to talk to announce that Ansley Wagner has been elevated to now be the supervisor and to oversee the research and publications unit in the Historical Resources Division. And we're excited about that. She's excited about that work. That means that we're going to be doing a search now for a new administrator of the Highway Marker program, which will be meeting next week. We have a very big agenda next week for that committee that will be meeting next week. Also, I'd like to, I'm pleased to announce that Kathleen McKee has been added as the new editor of the North Carolina Historical Review. And so she has jumped in, I think, full force with that work, and progress there is continuing to move at a really good pace. But we're happy to welcome them both into those new positions, happy to have them in those roles. I'll also say, before Ramona kind of jumps in here to add anything else, that tomorrow we will be holding, that I kind of talked about this a little bit, and you all talked about it in your last meeting about what we're doing to support the staff here and issues around recruitment and retention. But we're happy that we got real good support from leadership in the department to host a retreat for the Historical Resources Division to really kind of look at efforts around team building. We have many new people on that team, and a lot of us don't know each other. And so this is going to give us an opportunity over the next couple of days to kind of bond with each other and find ways that we can more smoothly work together. But Ramona, I'll yield the floor to you for a few minutes to add anything that you'd like to add there.
Sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Waters, and Mr. Chair and Commission members. It's always a pleasure to see you and glad to join you this morning. To say that there's excitement regarding our new hires and promotions is probably an understatement. We're very excited to have Ansley Wagner, who's been a veteran of the department in her almost third decade of working here. So she brings a great wealth of knowledge about state history in all the corners of the state. A very holistic sense of the state's history, which is what we're striving for at all times. And also to underscore Dr. Waters' comments about people not necessarily knowing each other. The pandemic is part of it, but also we had a presentation by HR some years ago before many of you were part of the commission. And it was a pie chart of how many people could literally walk out the door tomorrow with 30 years of service. And it was a very large slice of the pie. And we are now seeing all that play out. And so that succession planning is a bit challenging in state government. So that's part of our staff retreat effort as well, is to make sure everyone understands roles and understands the overall stewardship mission and the service mission that our division particularly is engaged with. So that's just another piece of the puzzle here, is lots of people came here and made their careers here. We'd like to continue to see that. But it will be a challenge with salaries and cost of living in our area, as we talked about at our last meeting. So again, I appreciate everyone's support and interest in our programs. Glad to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Ramona. Are there any questions for either Michelle or for Ramona? Thank you both for being here.
I'm always pleased and not surprised, but very pleased by the enthusiasm of particularly today directors Bardos and Lanier around their work and their mission. And that's one of the energy sources we get as commissioners, to just hear that from staff. And I think I can't say it enough. I say it at most quarterly meetings how much we appreciate you all, and exemplified by these two presentations today. So
thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank
and
you.
also I'd like to say, yes, I second Dr. Waters' comments about Dr. Bryan, because I think she's kind of taken a little bit of a low profiling that, but a lot of that, in my opinion, is she's done very, very good work in the Fayetteville area that, she's consciously, I think, not taking a higher profile with, but we do appreciate that, because that was getting that to where it is today, I think, is a big achievement.
Thank you. Very much.
And unanimously, again. So that was a huge, huge thing. And yes, Commissioner Groom, so glad to have you join us. So good to see you. Sorry, Dr. Waters, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead, Mr. Groom.
I've had some complications this morning, but I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Yes, glad to have you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both again to Ramona and to Michelle for being here and for adding those comments. And we continue to appreciate your support. The last thing that I will just highlight again, you're hearing a lot about this. You will continue to hear a lot about it as we continue to ramp up over the next year for planning and execution of our plans around America 250. I'm just returning from a trip to Richmond, where I was there, I guess, with about 30 of colleagues across the country who are in similar positions that I'm in here in North Carolina. And there's a lot of conversation and planning going on around America 250. But I do feel like North Carolina is really setting the kind of course for that. We seem to be ahead of a lot of other states around what they're doing. And so I'm excited about that, and want to thank Sarah Kuntz, who is really leading that effort here in the department for us across the department. So you'll continue to hear more about that. And just to let you know, I'm experiencing my first go around in the budget process. It's another very big learning experience. We continue to go through that. I want to just take the time to thank the members of the state legislature who last year in the budget last year did support with the work of the department and the Office of Archives and History, I think in a very strong way. We're optimistic that support will continue to be there. But we're working through the budget process as we speak. I think we're meeting again today to discuss some other items related to budget requests. So wish us, keep your fingers crossed and wish us luck as we continue to go through that process. But again, if there are any questions for me, I'm happy to fill those questions. And really, again, want to thank you for being here, and thank you for giving me this moment to kind of update you on some things going on in Office of Archives and History. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Waters. The next item on the agenda, being this time of the year, is, I think, helpful to point to next year, 2023, in terms of dates. I have some proposed dates in that we're virtual. It's not anything I can share with you paper-wise, but we'll go through this. What I'm perfectly open for is that I inadvertently, in my own mind, I kind of suggested maybe half of the quarterly meetings be virtually virtual like we're doing today, half in person. And then I had maybe the virtual, we kind of got in a pattern, if you will, a groove that the virtual meetings tended to be more at 2 o'clock, and then the in-person meetings were at 10 o'clock, and that prompted some confusion, understandably. So I'm open for, if you feel like that a uniform time, whether we're in person or not, or whether you feel strongly that we need to be in person at all meetings, I'm certainly open for that. I'm proposing, these are all Wednesdays, March 22nd, June 21st, September 20th, and December 6th, somewhat patterning after the timing of this year's meetings, obviously quarterly. I'm quite open, again, for your thoughts. It needs to be a consensus around whether we, one, meet, if you're okay with meeting 50% every other quarter. So March 22nd would be in person. The March and September meetings would be in person. The June and December meetings would be virtual. That's kind of my suggestion, but I'm certainly open for discussion on that. The other part of that is, do you feel that we should standardize the timing, whether we're in person or virtual, as to when the meeting is, either 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock? I'm open for any thoughts or discussions or feedback in that regard.
May I suggest 10 o'clock?
Again, I told Dr. Waters on a call earlier that I felt like that was inadvertently confusing to have different times. So is 10 o'clock the better time for everyone, just to be consistent?
That's fine.
Yes, I would say so.
Okay. Is there, again, any discussion or concern about doing a kind of 50-50 virtual versus in person? Our counsel, Phil Fagan, has indicated that under the current, we still have the legal ability or capability to meet virtually, even though the pandemic emergency, I think, is no longer in effect. But I think technically we still have that ability, as I think a lot of other agencies and a lot of other, this format, of course, has become almost the norm now in a lot of meetings, as you know.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
what is
Dr.
the overriding reason for the 50-50 split?
Well, I think it was probably just a convenience issue in terms of getting I think there's no question that we need to have some in-person meetings. The quality of those meetings tend to be quite different than this. I'm certainly open. As I said, I just suggested that there's nothing beyond other than just 50-50, maybe a transition away. You know, we were basically for a year and a half in nothing but virtual meetings. But I'm perfectly open to an agenda of today's nature, for example, very short agenda. You know, the question begs the question, would it have been worth driving all the way to Raleigh, for those of you that are not in the Raleigh area, for a meeting potentially less than an hour?
I appreciate that coming from far away. But I do agree with Dr. Denard that the conversation is definitely much different in person than it is virtually. I'm wondering if there is a trend that you see that, the December meeting tends to be less of a full agenda or something like that. And then maybe the 3 are in person and the final is virtual.
Well, Commissioner Condo, that you brought up an excellent point, and there is a tangible reason, because every other quarter we get the full staff director reports, which is time-consuming but incredibly quality. I mean, that we need those. We depend on hearing that kind of information from staff and directors, but that's only done every other quarter. I think that's far better done in person, honestly. And that's kind of, now that I think about it, that may have been inadvertently what I was thinking about, the quarterly meetings where we get the staff and director reports, that they need to be in person. The non-quarterly could be more focused on a virtual meeting.
This is Susan Phillips. I really appreciate today's decision to have this meeting virtually because I think it is a very short agenda. I'm fine. I think that the 50-50 split is appropriate. I would just ask that if there is a controversial issue or an issue that the public would have a lot of interest in, or that we feel that the chair be given the responsibility for determining from the agenda whether an in-person meeting would be preferred in either June or December.
I like
that's an excellent decision or excellent advice. I think one of the things we do from time to time, and Parker orchestrates this, is just do a poll, and we could, a few days, a few weeks before a meeting, particularly given the context of the agenda that we may be faced with, we may have to call that as an in-person meeting. Yes.
I think that would work well for the commission, for the climate, and for the public.
I agree.
I would agree.
May I
do
ask
too.
that maybe because we need to approve the dates, and that the dates be approved, and that the nature of the meeting be determined at the discretion of the chair based on the nature of the agenda. Is that a fair way to handle this? Because we can't anticipate what our meetings are going to necessarily look like, as you know, oftentimes until 2 or 3 weeks before.
Chairman
We need a
Ruffin,
mo-
I make a motion that we approve the dates and leave whether it is virtual or in person up to the chair. This is
I
Barbara
second
Snowden.
that. I second that motion.
Commissioner Snowden, seconded by Dr. Bryan, that we accept the dates of March 22nd, June 21st, September 20th, and December 6th as meetings for the 2023 North Carolina Historical Commission, the nature of which, virtual or in person, would be left to the discretion of the chair.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, are we considering the schedule you propose in terms of in-person, virtual, or is it just every meeting or looking forward? Can we kind of anticipate that, or is it every meeting you will just make that call
I think
based on that motion?
If we have no significant agenda issues, certainly controversial in nature, I would certainly think of, in other words, a mirroring today's rather short abbreviated agenda, I would think a virtual would be practical.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because
Thank you,
that
sir.
also does mean that we're not hearing from all the directors and the staff in terms of their detailed reports.
Thank you.
Okay, we've had a motion and a second. I'll ask for approval by indication of yes. Dr. Braun,
Yes.
Mayor Clark,
Yes.
Ms. Condell,
Yes.
Dr. Denard,
Yes.
Mr. Dixon,
Yes.
Ms. Groom,
Yes.
Dr. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds,
Yes.
Ms. Snowden,
Yes.
David Ruffin, yes. Okay, under other business, I felt very strongly about it's been alluded to already today, about the discussion that we had on really two fronts at the last commission meeting on September 21st. And I'm kind of a believer that, we all are guilty of falling in the trap of, talk is cheap, and we talk about things but don't really do anything about it. And I, in that regard, I told Dr. Waters, I feel very strongly that we needed to move beyond just having a discussion. And the issues, of course, were one about the issue of the so-called degradation of historical awareness, particularly through the educational system, and what effect that's having on the general population eventually. And secondly, the staffing issues that Ramona Bartos has even alluded to, and I thought did an excellent job of talking about in the last commission meeting. So I have wording, again, because of this is one of the drawbacks of having a virtual meeting. We don't have the ability to share the wording. I will read that. So I have two resolutions that I'd like to present to you. I'm taking the chair's prerogative on this and going ahead and presenting you with two resolutions. One, let's separate them in terms of any voting or discussion. The first is to, and I'll read them twice. Again, at some level, I'll be glad to certainly send all this to each commissioner. Is resolved that the North Carolina Historical Commission, being aware of a general degradation of awareness of history among secondary and college students, and thus in the general population, implores all aspects of state government having influence on public education to reassess the value and prioritization of history as a critical part of instructional curricula going forward. To that end, the North Carolina Historical Commission requests specific staff recommendations be presented at the next meeting of the commission. Do I hear any discussion, debate, concerns, qualifications, whatever? I'll read it again.
To me,
may I read it again because you don't have it in front of you. Resolved that the North Carolina Historical Commission, being aware of a general degradation of awareness of history among secondary and college students, and thus in the general population, implores all aspects of state government having influence on public education to reassess the value and prioritization of history as a critical part of instructional curricula going forward. To that end, the North Carolina Historical Commission requests specific staff recommendations be presented at the next meeting of the commission. Commissioner Phillips, looked like you were muted. Can you get...
This is Susan Phillips. And I would prefer, I certainly would support the resolution, but I would prefer stronger language instead of saying assess and I didn't get it, but it was something about reassess the value
and prioritization.
Yes. I would prefer just saying prioritize. Because we don't want them to reassess the value and decide that it's been too valued. We want them to to prioritize it.
So in other words, to say public education to prioritize history, not reassess it. Okay.
That's my feeling, not reassess it. We don't need more talking about it. We need it prioritized.
Fixed. Right.
Yes, that's an excellent point. That's a wiggle room potential there.
this is Barbara Snowden. I like the idea at the end that you ask staff to give specific recommendations, because a lot of these things just get washed over. And the fact that you have to report back or give us suggestions and things that can be done is very important.
Yeah, that's an action plan that I think, honestly, I give credit to the legal counsel and Dr. Waters on. They did advise that there needed to be some kind of action that came from that. So I agree with you 100%, Commissioner Snowden.
So, Chairman Ruffin-Denard, specifically, what staff about here?
What would you, well, I think it's up to Dr. Waters, frankly, to direct whatever staff or director that he feels would have particular input in this area or would have any pertinent or tangible recommendation that could be done to promote the spirit of this resolution.
Go ahead, Dr. Johnson.
Dr. Johnson here. I was going to say that maybe it says staff recommendations, and what I'd be willing to do is work, if staff have questions or want to work with commissioners, if they come up with a recommendation, I don't want to leave it just as them coming up with something, since we're making the resolution. And so I think we've got the resolution, but guidance around how to implement these recommendations should include, at least I'd be open to having staff contact me to have discussion and dialogue about specifics, including identifying resources needed to help this happen.
Dr. Johnson, I think to your exact point, I would envision that the next meeting include a very vibrant discussion of not a dialogue, whole commission and staff, but certainly not to discourage one-on-one contacts in the interim.
I'd like to suggest something as a new commissioner and as an educator. The public educators get their information from history through the standard course of study and through the Buncombe County the North Carolina Board of Education. And I've thought of this before, that it seems to me that our historical commission can work with Department of Education and supply at least the public education teachers with the volumes of information that we have available. That might be a very naive sort of thing to say, but when I was teaching, I didn't think about going to this department to get my historical information. I would go to the North Carolina Board of Education or the Department of Education. So it seems to me that a natural tie is between these two departments that could respond to a lot of these issues. All right, I'm just throwing that out there.
No, I get your point fully, Commissioner Groom. I think one of the things that I would hope we could keep in the resolution is just a general spirit of concern. If we go down too many specifics in the resolution, we may be inaccurate and or creating controversy where we don't need to. I think the first step is always to say, what is the problem? Mm-hmm. The problem, I think, was universally agreed to in the room on September 21st. We had a major problem of the wittingly or unwittingly, the degradation of history, right, liberal arts generally, and things of that nature over, frankly, 50 years of educational curriculum. And we felt like it's high time we just call that problem. I think the whole issue of asking staff for input around the specifics of how we get at solving the problem, yes, is going to be exactly along the lines you just talked about.
Oh, okay, I understand. Thank you. Thank you for explaining that to me.
And those were the light of my comments, not to change the resolution, but just to give some more context for Dr. Waters when he talks to the staff, when this comes to them, what we were thinking, how we're thinking about this, because I think that will help them come up with recommendations, including some of the things they already are engaged in. I know that there have been interface with teachers from the archives and history end in doing workshops with teachers around history. So we can learn more about those specifics as they bring the recommendations. But I just wanted to help us have enough context for them to make really informed recommendations to us.
I think Commissioner Grooms, your comments are relevant. And Commissioner Johnson, I appreciate your comments as well. I think at the museum, we are consistently asked for help to supplement curriculum. You know, I think we all know that it's not sort of answering all the questions that we have in front of us today. So I think that's a really great point, Commissioner Johnson, that to give Dr. Waters some context as he's discussing this issue is very relevant. And that as historians, we're all interested in helping to break down some of those barriers and create paths forward. So I appreciate those comments.
And Mr. Chair, if I may add something here.
Of course, Dr. Dillon.
I think this is an excellent step toward being intentional. We are the custodians and keepers of the state history. We should be intentional in what we think should be prioritized, dealing with history. And ultimately, and I don't think we've had this in the past, we could think about developing something of a position paper, setting forth, certain principles and guidelines that would be a little more precise than, this resolution that we're talking about now. Because I think to some extent, we've kind of abdicated the throne of our work here and left it to other folk. And we reclaim, that leadership position, that we have, and then give directions, to the teachers, staff, legislators, and all of that, And you bring to this, you have on this commission some of the best minds, that have studied history and know the real significance of it, So we don't need to follow this kind of hands-off policy or lukewarm policy. We need to become more direct and intentional, and setting forth some guidelines with regard to how we should prioritize the teaching.
Well, I totally agree with you. There's a little bit of a breakup, at least I'm from my end, hearing everything you were saying, Dr. Denard. But I see a lot of even what you're saying just now as being part of next quarter's meeting around what are the specific action plans we're talking about. We like to think we know history, and we're largely appointed volunteers from a disparate area of business and other professions on this commission, but we're not in the weeds. We don't work. And the fear I have of going too far down that detail in a resolution is that we make in an era that would create a resistance, or someone even saying, I don't know, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't understand the nuance of government, or they don't understand what has to happen to get this done. And I feel pretty strongly at this point that we ought to narrow the resolution to just stating we see a problem. And we are frankly at the point of saying it needs to be pointed out. And as commission, the North Carolina Historical Commission, we feel honored to be in this position, but we feel like we owe it to the rest of the, not just state government, but the general population of North Carolina to express this frustration.
I agree.
I see this as
I think
this.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mary Lynn.
No, I was simply going to say that I think we all agree that there is a problem, that history is overlooked often when it ought to be counted more than a lot of other things are. And that we are in a position to simply be able to say that and to be more assertive about the state's role in supporting the teaching of history and making history available to folks who live here and who come through the state as tourists and want to find something more about it. But to be, I think we have to rely upon the wonderful staff that the department has to come up with specifics. In the project I've been involved in, we recognize that by talking to many teachers, not every teacher, but we've talked to a lot of teachers about the period of our history that covers antebellum, Civil War, emancipation and Reconstruction. And we talk to them about how they teach it or what they've taught. And the interesting thing to us is that many of them don't teach it because they don't know how and they feel uncomfortable. Well, that's a tragedy for all the young people that don't have access to a teacher who has the material and feels comfortable with it, if that's the problem. And so a part of our recommendation is actually, we've been working with the Department of Education to begin to talk about how we can be sure that there is access to what our History Center is developing and how we can work with people. But I just know that there is a problem and there are a variety of ways to solve it. And personally, I think we need to rely upon all the wonderful people who work for us to help us solve it. But I like the idea of making a statement that we recognize that we need to be, as David said, more intentional about what we need to do to promote the value of learning it. And that's what I would like to see stressed in his resolution. I think that is something that the commission a long time ago used to see as its prerogative in a way. And there were historians and leaderships on it, again, a long time ago, who really had that focus and could go and promote where the need occurred. And I just want us to be very thoughtful about this and be very focused on what we're trying to do. But I would love to see us. I like your resolution and I like the changes as well to make it more intentional.
Mr. Reynolds.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in support of the resolution. I did want to comment on some of the nuances that have been discussed so far. One of the commissioners had, mentioned that we all come from a variety of backgrounds, and we're really a volunteer board and don't work day to day with the staff of the department. But we do have the opportunity to have a megaphone where we can, sound out and bring attention to something. And I think that's about as far as our formal role can go. I think Deputy Secretary Waters has a wonderful staff, and it's our role to support him and allow him to direct the staff across the state to do what I think that the department can do. If we feel that history is being ignored or not appreciated as much, or perhaps not translated or shared correctly, or certain persons or things have been left out, we have a wonderful set of historic sites and museums and programs where we can market and address that way to generate the interest and try to attract more people to the history of our state. So along those lines, I would be fully supportive of, sounding the alarm, so to speak, and using our megaphone.
Well said. Well said.
Okay. Barbara Snowden, what I was going to say earlier, I agree with Mary Lynn, and I also agree with Noah very much so. I see this as a two-part thing. The resolution is our first step. We're saying there's a problem. We want that problem acknowledged, because part of the problem is it has not been acknowledged. People think they're teaching history correctly. They think that history is great. I love what you're doing, but yet it is not getting down to the lower area where the kids are and where the students are. So I see this as two parts. The resolution is the first part. That is ringing the bell as loudly as we can that this is a problem that we see in our state. And then after we have rung the bell and have come up with some specific things that we think can do that can help this, then we take the step of, all right, how do we help these people who are actually teaching history? How do we contact them? How do we get the information to them? And how do we have it presented in such a way that it will be usable? I spent 30 some years in the classroom, and I know a lot of times the only way that I knew that the Department of Archives and History was doing something and will give me a study guide or would give me information was my connection through the junior historians or through the Federation of Historical Society. It did not come down to me as something through the channels of the superintendent, my principal, and me. And so one of our major problems is going to be communication. We do not want to start a political war in the General Assembly about what is being taught. But we do need to say that this is a problem that we see in all of our areas. And the advantage of this commission is we go from coast to the mountains and we represent every area. And so if it's happening in Currituck, I'm sure it's happening in Buncombe, and I'm sure it's happening in Raleigh. And so we're what is it? The town crier. It's the one who set off the word. We're the town criers. And so I do approve of the resolution.
Thank you, Commissioner Snowden. May I read any other comments on this resolution? May I reread what I presume to be the modified version? Resolved that the North Carolina Historical Commission, being aware of a general degradation of awareness of history among secondary and college students and thus in the general population, employs all aspects of state government having influence on public education to reprioritize history as a critical part of its instructional curricula going forward. To that end, the North Carolina Historical Commission requests specific staff recommendations be presented at the next meeting of the commission. Do I hear any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, flesh out reprioritize. Is that the best word?
The assumption may be that we have already prioritized or why we need to reprioritize. And I don't think we have really prioritized this matter to the extent we should have.
But my context of where I come from out of this is that I'm old enough, probably older than anybody on this call, perhaps, but is what happened in 1957 with Sputnik. The whole country had a nervous breakdown. We were scared to death. We were losing ground in science and math to the Soviet Union at that point. We went hog wild on that issue. We basically, from that point on, I would argue, we started degrading liberal arts, history, and things of that nature. You know, it got caught up in a lot of that. And I think it's not just happened, and it has almost nothing to do with like you just said, Commissioner Snowden, about current politics or the heat of the current
Yes.
political environment. It's just the nature of how we chose to budget and prioritize, if you will. So the comfort I have is reprioritize, but I'm certainly open for any other synonym or word that would be more impactful.
But I would be in favor of just using the word prioritize and not reprioritize.
Okay, it was that your general point, Commissioner Reynolds?
I would be concerned that if you said reprioritize, it would make us sound like we want to arrange the furniture on the deck of the ship. And I think certain parties might take that as us going where we shouldn't go.
Okay, I hear. No, I genuinely appreciate Commissioner Reynolds' perspective, because we went through that a couple of years, 3 years ago, and he's keenly aware of, and he's right. We are a megaphone. We have to be sensitive, and frankly, Dr. Waters, the staff would have to be sensitive on, we're not going to rewrite state government through this.
No.
And nobody's going to, because that would be a net negative for all of us to trample on, basic organization of government. But
and Mr. Chair, if I may, prioritize introduces the conversation. Aren't we already prioritizing? And some people may say, no, we're not. Some people may say, yes, we are. But that would be the intent behind just using prioritize instead of the reprioritize, which again makes me think about arranging the furniture on the deck of the ship.
Yes.
See, Mr. Chair, Ramona's comment there of the word amplify.
Amplify.
Just throw that out there for consideration. I deeply appreciate this discussion.
This is Susan Phillips. I think that's a great word, Ms. Bartos, because it does specifically request that that people in state government provide more information about the teaching of history. I think that's a perfect choice.
Not re-amplify, but amplify. Okay. Any further discussion? That's a great. See, we're already collaborating with staff already. Thank you, Director Bartos. All right. Is there, if we substitute prioritize with the word amplify, is that, do you need it reread again, or are we ready to vote? Okay, I call the, as they say, call the question, I guess. So do I hear a motion?
I will move I'm sorry, go ahead. I'll move the recommendation with the substitution of amplify for reprioritize.
Thank you, Commissioner Reynolds. Do I hear a second?
This is Barbara Snowden. I second.
Commissioner Snowden seconds. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes or aye. Dr. Bryan.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor Clark.
Aye.
Ms. Condell. Dr. Denard.
Yes, aye.
Mr. Dixon had to go into court. Ms. Groom.
Yes.
Dr. Johnson.
Yes.
Ms. Phillips.
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds.
Yes.
Ms. Snowden.
Yes.
David Ruffin, yes. It is passed unanimously with those that are present. The second resolution is lacking a call to action per se, but is just a general statement, if you will. And I don't know that it does have to have a call to action other than reflecting a statement. And of course, a lot of this had to do with I'm glad the progress that's been stated even today about hiring new positions, having more people come in. It sounds like that's not quite as the level of almost crisis that we heard at the last quarterly meeting, but we still have a sensitivity around that issue. And then the wording is this: resolved that the North Carolina Historical Commission, being aware of the current economic conditions, particularly those resulting in significant salary inflation, are taking a disproportionate toll on state government staffing in areas critical to the preservation of history, request heightened awareness of this issue relative to determine the state budget going forward. It is merely a statement of, not without, you know, it's just a statement of concern that we get our place at the table at this next round of the budget.
I think having a statement like that is very important. I can't see any downside to it at all. And I think it's well said.
I would agree with that. Dr. Waters, as you're going through your, as you were saying, your first budget run and that sort of thing, does this sound supportive to you for what you're needing?
Absolutely, it does.
Okay.
And I think the two members of the team that are here would agree with that, Mayor Clark.
Okay.
Well, I'll reread that. Resolved that the North Carolina Historical Commission, being aware of the current economic conditions, particularly those resulting in significant salary inflation, are taking a disproportionate toll on state government staffing in areas critical to the preservation of history, request heightened awareness of this issue relative to determining the state budget going forward.
I think so.
It's somewhat akin to the spirit of the first resolution, but it's a broader statement of just please keep this awareness as we all know, whatever we do in other areas, it's the budget that is the fuel by which the government runs on. So anyway, I'm again open for any discussion on this proposed resolution.
Well, Mr. Chair, I think that other departments across the state government are thinking and probably considering the same type of resolution. So I would hate for us not to do that, and when a lot of others are. So I don't see any harm in it.
Just going to
Further discussion.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I was just going to add here, if we were to invite Ms. Bartos and Ms. Lanier into this conversation now. I think you heard a lot of that last time about the demands on the programs that they're already overseeing, especially in historical resources. The demands for those programs and those services are increasing. And so which is a good thing, because it shows that we're taking historic preservation very serious, and we do in this state. And so I deeply appreciate the fact that we know that we have your support in the efforts that we need to ensure that we are compensating the team in a way that I think that they need to be compensated. So thank you.
Well, human capital is an issue all across the various industries. The industry I work in is the back shop support for risk management is in serious trouble, because a lot of the, frankly, the traditional remuneration, believe it or not, in the banking world is in a more traditional, gradual stepping of promotions, and people are leaving banking to go to other more exotic financial services products that are paying more money. So this is an issue, the budget is divided in either we give grants to certain things or action, or we got human capital to protect. This is really more about just protecting our human capital. And we're all going to, as you said, everybody's going through parts of this, and it's not just within government, it's also with many industries. So that's the insidiousness to this, because we've had such low rates and low inflation for so long. To have such a bump up like this, it's creating a lot of stress. to compete for good human capital. And we just don't need to be silent in that, because as we go to the, frankly, as the legislature starts looking at the budget, I think that they have to kind of be thoughtful and realistic, that it's no longer just a, let's put money on a thing or an enhancement or a program or a building. Let's also protect our human capital.
And I would just like to add, Mr. Chair, this is Chairman Johnson, Commissioner Johnson, excuse me.
You are chair of the African American Commission.
Yes. But that as I talked with the various staff in the Department of Archives and Histories about the work, and where the expectations for their work has exponentially increased from the public. As they go out and do what they're doing, they're expected to do even more and more. And the public doesn't always understand all the things that they are already engaged in. And so when they don't see something happen, it's as if they're not doing the work, and they show up all over the state. I'll just leave it at that part, because I like to later, when we're finished, make a commendation, please.
Yes. Okay, any other questions or comments or discussion? Do I hear a motion?
I will move we approve the statement as drafted.
Second.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bryan moves, and I believe it's Mayor Clark second. So all in favor say aye or yes. Dr. Bryan.
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Yes.
Is Ms. Condell still with us? Not sure. Dr. Denard.
Yes.
Ms. Groom.
Yes.
Dr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds.
Yes.
Ms. Snowden.
Yes.
David Ruffin. Yes. Dr. Waters, I'll send you you and Parker, the revised wording of the resolutions, just to be perfectly accurate around not only the minutes, but that you, for the record, for your work.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chairman, this is Parker.
Yes.
If I may suggest that the commissioners, I don't know if a vote is required, but request that these resolutions be added as amendments to the meeting minutes. This is not something that is typically done. I would often just put the language inside the minutes, but I think in this case, it would be appropriate to amend these two resolutions as accepted to the minutes.
Yes, for whatever format that is required or appropriate. Again, this has been, for the record, this has been discussed with our counsel, Phil Fagan, and it was deemed appropriate to be presented by the chair under other business, particularly because it was an extension of a lot of discussion, as you recall, at our September 21st meeting. That was the impetus for this. Commissioner Phillips, yes.
Mr. Chairman, my name was not called in the roll, and I would like to vote yes.
I beg your pardon, Ms. Phillips,
fine.
please, of course. I apologize for the oversight.
Mr. Chairman, as listening to what Parker says, I make a motion that we attach the resolution and the statement to the minutes.
Commissioner Snowden has moved that they be amended to the minutes. Attached to the minutes, excuse me. Do I hear a second?
I will second that.
Dr. Denard has seconded. You just wanted to hear one more roll call, didn't you?
Sorry about that.
Dr. Bryan.
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Yes.
Ms. Condell, I don't believe I see her still. Dr. Denard.
Yes.
Ms. Groom.
Yes.
Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson?
Yes, I
okay.
was trying to get to
Okay.
my mute, sorry.
Ms. Phillips?
Yes.
Ms. Phillips votes yes. Mr. Reynolds?
Yes.
Ms. Snowden?
Yes.
And David Austin, yes. And the dog, whatever his name is, or her name is. So I believe that concludes, obviously, I used the other business segment of the agenda for these resolutions. And we've talked about the dates. There are no chair announcements beyond what we've discussed already. I certainly look forward to the meeting on March the 22nd, which I'll go ahead and say absolutely that would need to be in person, because we're going to have directors make their reports. And I think the whole dynamic of that meeting with directors and staff in the room with the commission is really irreplaceable in a virtual format. So we look forward to that. So that clearly would be in person. Being the time of the year it is, needless to say, wish everyone happy holiday season and good health, because that's something we all have to be sensitive to this time of year, obviously. So again, thank you. And Parker, stay on the mend, sir. And I'll work with you on getting the signatures that you need on the sessions and de-sessions. Schedule that. Any further comments or questions?
I have
Yes, Dr. Johnson, you had mentioned you wanted to say something. Yes.
just to say to everyone that the Maritime History Council had its 32nd meetings. And what I wanted to bring to y'all's attention is the tremendous support our state archaeologists have given to the work that has been done around maritime archaeology and maritime history. They show up. They participate, they are working well with the ECU students in maritime studies. And I just wanted to, especially Ramona, know that you have got an amazing team who show up, and the public face that they give to what we're doing in the state is incredible. And so those meetings, we missed you, Barbara, were wonderful. And I love always going to the coast. And I want to encourage more of my commissioners, as I know it's a long trek for some of you, to come out to the coast and see what is going on there. It is the kind of interpretation of our history has been really important. And now I've been telling folk about the story of whaling in North Carolina, and people said, there was whaling in North Carolina? I said, of course. But that's the kind of thing that doesn't get popularized and known. And so I just wanted to give a commendation to your office, and as well as the museum, our museum staff, our Maritime Museum history staff are always present and supportive. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Commissioner Johnson. Well, at this point, do I hear a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Dr. Denard has moved. Do I hear a second?
Second from
Dr. Johnson has seconded. One last time, a roll call. All in favor of adjournment. Dr. Braun.
Yes, and Merry Christmas, everyone.
As to you, of course. Mayor Clark.
Yes, and also Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, everyone.
Ms. Condell has just acknowledged she had to excuse herself. So we miss her. Dr. Denard.
Yes, and happy holidays to everyone.
And Ms. Groom. Ms. Groom, you.
Yes, and thank you all for putting up with me and my newness to the commission, and have a lovely holiday.
Thank you, Ms. Dr. Johnson.
Yes, and joyous holidays to everyone.
Mr. Reynolds.
Yes, and season's greetings and a happy new year to all of the commissioners and to Dr. Waters and the staff.
Ms. Snowden.
Yes, and Merry Christmas to all of you. And I second Dr. Johnson's suggestion that you all come down to the coast.
David Ruffin, yes, thank you so much, and stay healthy and happy into 2023. Take care. Thank you all for your
Thank
very,
you.
very valuable time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Ciao.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Matt.